Hello makers, and welcome to Share Stitchery. If you're new here, I'm Katherine Harris, and I do sewing and DIY tutorials each week, so stay tuned. This week, I wanted to do a sew along as well as a pattern review for the McCall's M7599 pattern. Now this is a vintage pattern from the McCall's archives from 1953. It has a full circle skirt, fitted bodice, and you get in through a zipper along the side, and then it has some ties, which are functional ties, with little bow ties at the top on your shoulders. When I saw that detail, I just knew I had to test it out. So let's get to that tutorial.
Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum.
So first we're going to start on the bodice. So we're going to take a bodice front and back pieces and we're going to stitch in the darts. And if you've seen any of my videos before, you will be very familiar with how I'm doing these darts. I'm placing the pin in and I'm actually following that line along the dart line in order to match it up. It's a lot faster than doing the tailor tacks. And then when I go to the end, I do not backstitch. And I leave a long tail of both my bobbin and top thread, and then I'm going to tie that a couple of times to secure it so that the point lays nice and flat. So now that we've got the front and the back darts in, so the back darts are waist darts and the front darts are going to be French darts going in at the bust. We are going to stitch one side and then we're going to press that, and we're going to leave the other side because that is where we're going to place the side zip. Now I folded under 1 inch of a hem on the lining of the fabric. My lining happens to be the exact same fabric as the dress, and I wanted this because you will be seeing the underside of the ties in the bodice. Now if you wanted to have a fun color pop, this would be great to do your lining in a different color. Next, you're going to stitch all the way around the entire lining and bodice, stopping at the edge that we have open, and then we are going to clip all of the curves here. So I'm just making some notches in here so that when we turn it and press it, it is going to lay nice and it's going to allow that fabric to stretch nicely. So once we're done that, we are going to turn this right side out. So I'm just going to quickly pull this through, and then I'm going to get my point turner, which is a little wooden point turner here, and I'm just going to poke out the edges with that and then do a little bit of steam with the iron. So now that it is all pressed, it's going to look like this. And we have the two sides that are open. This is the point where you want to put your back tag on because you don't want that to show through. Now we're going to move on to preparing our circle skirt. So this is very simple, just like any other circle skirt. And because it is 2 pieces, we can add in some pockets. Bear in mind, if you are adding in pockets, we will be having a zip going through that because it is a side zip. I opted to not put pockets in. Shocker, I know. But the reason for that is because of that side zip. It is doable, but it creates a little extra bulk that I didn't want on my hips. So once you've got those 2 stitched together, we're going to stitch the underskirt. So this is the top of the underskirt, and I did it in the same fabric as my dress, and you're going to leave a little slit along the top. That's where the edge of the zipper is going to come through. So right here is actually supposed to be tulle, but I didn't have any tulle or netting on hand, so I decided to use cotton broadcloth, which is what I'm using for my lining. Just 2 long rectangles that I am pinning together, right sides together, to create a long cylindrical tube. So we will have 2 of those tubes going together. And right here you can see me placing them right sides together so that the seams are facing each other. And this is what's going to cause that ruffle and that fullness within the skirt. So the first thing that I am going to do along the top is I am going to stitch it together, And then I'm going to serge both of the bottoms separately, and then I'm going to do a long running stitch so that I can gather the skirt pieces together. So you can see me gathering them. Make sure you do 2 of those long running stitches together because it makes it a lot easier. I also stopped at each of the edges where I have those big bulky seams. If you try to go through that, you may pull out some of those stitches. Next, I have gathered it so that it matches the same as our underskirt lining piece that we have done. And I'm just matching that together, placing right sides together. I'm matching up the 2 seams on the corners, which match up those 2 side seams. Then I'm going to pin it and stitch all along the edge here. So I've stitched and serged that, and this is what our underskirt looks like when it's complete. Just imagine that there is tulle under there. Next, we are going to attach the circle skirt front on the outside in the main fashion fabric to our underskirt. And I'm just securing that with pins along the sides. And you should have the openings the exact same. That's where the side zipper is going to go. And then I'm just going to stitch all around the top as well as going down the sides where the zipper goes. Next, we're going to attach the skirt to the bodice. So now that this is essentially one piece for the skirt, we are going to attach the front of the bodice. So not the bodice lining, which we had turned up. That's going to be hand stitched in later. We're just going to pin all around the waist of our dress with right sides together, and then we're going to pop over to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch around that, and I also serged it, though it is going to be completely hidden, so you don't necessarily need to serge it because it's going to be hidden by that lining, but I just wanted that little extra security with those stitches so that it holds together a lot nicer. And that is what that looks like once it's all stitched. Next, we're going to install the side zip. So with this, we are going to fold our lining on the bodice out of the way. And then we are going to pin our zipper down. And it's the exact same as you would install a regular invisible zipper. Now, if you want a more detailed tutorial on that, I will leave a link in the description down below, as well as a card up here so that you can see exactly how you would do that. Tip here is I'm using a water-soluble marker to mark where my seam is on the opposite side of the zipper so that I get it matched up absolutely perfectly. Now onto the hem. You want to let this hem sit for at least 24 hours on a dress form. If you don't have one, use a hanger because it's going to stretch out of shape because it's cut on the bias. Next, I did a double fold and stitched that. Now we're on to the finishing touches. And what that means is hand stitching in our lining. So I'm just going in and I'm pinning my lining, and you see it's a little bit a ways away from the edge of the zipper. We want to make sure that it's nice and easy to get that zipper up and down. If you put it too close to the zipper teeth, it is a bit cumbersome, and when you've got a bit of bulk along where the waist is, sometimes it's a bit more difficult to get into. Next, I am putting some pins in along the waistline, and then we're going to be hand stitching these in place. Now my pins are going through all layers of fabric, but when we do our hand stitching, we are going to only go through one layer of fabric, well, I guess 2, so one, that being the lining, and the second one is the seam in which the lining is going into on that waist seam, because we do not want it to show through the front. So here's a close-up on the stitch that I am doing, and it looks practically invisible. Just keep going all along here. I start on one side and then follow right through to the other side. Zip that up. So now that we've got the construction of the dress all out of the way, I wanted to impart some of my thoughts on working with this particular pattern. So one of the things that I really enjoyed was the fact that it was fully lined. And in that underskirt, it actually had a tulle layer. Yes, I did omit that only because I didn't have any tulle on hand. That being said, if you want something that is very much a retro feeling dress or something that's a little bit more dressy, that tulle is fantastic to add. But if you wanted something that you could wear more as an everyday dress, popping out to the park or the shops, then I would suggest that you omit that tulle layer and just have that underskirt. It creates more of a simple silhouette that is a little bit more modern, but it still has that nice retro feel from the rest of the pattern. Now on to some of the parts that I didn't quite like. And it doesn't come as such a big surprise, but the fit of this pattern wasn't the greatest, especially within the bodice. So I find on any of the big 4 patterns, I have to do quite a bit of adjustments. And if you look at the line drawings, it appears to have a bit of a cowl neckline scooping down. And when I had that draped on my dress form and later when I did up the muslin and put it on myself, it did not look very flattering. So what I ended up doing was I ended up taking it in, creating more of a flat boat neckline here, and really taking it in pretty much everywhere in different increments so that I could get the look that I wanted. In all actual fact, it probably would have been faster, easier, and looked better if I would have just draped the bodice on the dress form. But that would defeat the purpose of actually reviewing the pattern. Now, one of the things I do really enjoy are these ties. Now, this dress has been washed a couple of times so that I could really see how things fit and worked, especially after I've washed and dried it. I chose a fabric that I could throw into the dryer as well, and you'll notice that this side looks quite lovely, whereas this side is kind of sticking off to the side. So you're going to have to press it and retie them probably every time you wash it, even though I didn't do that, but I wanted to use that as a bit of an example of that. So in terms of an everyday dress, this probably wouldn't be my go-to simply because I had to make so many adjustments and it is a bit more finicky when it comes to actually putting it on in the morning. But for an occasion dress, that is a great idea. So if you've tested out this pattern, let me know your thoughts and experiences on it. Or if you have any ideas on what you'd like me to review next, just let me know in the comments down below. And if you're new here, I'd encourage you to please subscribe to my channel. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Until next time, makers, let's get our Sew-Spiration on.